الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Allah, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. All praise belongs to Allah, Lord of all that exists, and blessings and peace upon the master of the messengers Muhammad, his family and followers, and all his companions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon you all. Very warm welcome. Thank you to those of you who joined early and those of you who just joined. Welcome to you too. Alhamdulillah, we've got over 150 of us here. So we're going to make the most of the next hour and 20 minutes or so. We were scheduled to finish by 6:30. And as was mentioned, the core part should be done by 6 o'clock. And then after that, we'll got half an hour to deal with all of the questions. And I know from experience that there will be a ton of questions. That's why you can upvote the questions. And so we will deal with the questions in the order of popularity. So before you ask another question or your question, just flick through the questions and see if something's already there that reflects what you are feeling. Then you can just vote it up, inshallah. And then that way we will be more efficient and we'll try and deal with all of the queries and the questions. Okay. So look, the core of today is to look at this one specific aspect of zakah, which is the calculation. How do we calculate accurately? But it's important to appreciate what it is that we are talking about when we talk about zakah in the first place. Many of us, we've actually lost the connection with the true function of this pillar of Islam. So for 5 minutes or so, I want to talk about that before we move on to the calculation specifically. So as we know, zakah is a pillar of Islam, but it's very important that we understand this in its fullest sense, that it's not just a pillar of Islam, meaning an individual obligation for me and you to pay a certain amount of money on an annual basis, but it's a pillar of Islam in that as a result of us paying our zakah and it being used properly, Islam itself as a phenomenon, as a way of life in the societies around us, that Islam itself is upheld. Right? So it's a little bit like salah being a pillar of Islam. It doesn't just mean I have to do my salah. It means that as a result of me doing my salah and everyone around me doing my salah properly, Islam is upheld. This submission, devotion, commitment to the Lord of the heavens and the earth is upheld and is furthered, is promoted, okay, as a phenomenon. It's really, really important for us to understand that. And the way that happens with zakah is not just through an act of payment, but through how zakah is used and distributed. Okay, how we use money when it comes to money is then results or gives us the effects in society that we're looking for. 28 times in the Quran is mentioned alongside salah. So salah and zakah are constantly coming together in the Quran. Whereas fasting and hajj are mentioned, of course, but they're mentioned not with that level of frequency. And typically with fasting and hajj, there's a lot more detail mentioned about fasting and hajj. So they're mentioned in fewer places at longer length. But salah and zakah are just really, we could do a whole session. I know some of you may have attended a session I've done before, 2 hours, just on the Quranic references on salah and zakah. And what do we learn from that? There's so much beautiful, so many beautiful learnings and wisdoms, okay, from understanding the importance of this. But just to really appreciate, okay, how salah and zakah are very much intertwined, even though we think about them sometimes very differently. In terms of the payment, zakah refers to an obligatory payment of a certain percentage, typically 2.5%, on qualifying zakatable wealth annually, once a year. And I say typically 2.5% because for most of us that will be the case, but zakah is also 5% and 10% and 20%, okay, on types of assets, which we won't be covering today, but zakah is also due on crops. Zakah is due on agricultural produce, is due on certain cattle, animals, right, cows and sheep and all the rest of it. It's also due on underground treasures and minerals, right? There's a really interesting discussion about is zakah due on oil deposits, okay, under the ground. So these are on various percentages, okay? And so when we pay 2.5%, again, just as far as our just knowledge and understanding is concerned, it's important for us to realize that, yes, it's 2.5%, but actually this is a wider system of like a levy, right, on the believers, a wider system that covers all different aspects of the economy and society. So why pay zakah? What are some of the wisdoms, okay, of zakah? Number one, it's a means of demonstrating our individual and collective commitment to Allah, okay? So yes, it's an obligation, but we don't just pay it because we have to pay it. We pay it because we understand that sacrificing a portion of our wealth once a year for the sake of Allah demonstrates our commitment to Him. And as we discussed, when the money is being used, zakat is supposed to be used to further the kinds of things or deal with the kinds of problems in society that get in the way of our faith progressing. And that's why zakat finances the development, the progress, the growth of faith and the faithful. You know, many people, when you ask them, okay, and maybe you can put this in the chat, okay, put your own reflections. You know, why should we pay zakah? What's the real motivation? What's the benefit of paying zakah? Many of us, okay, the first thing we think about is purification, and we think about purification of wealth. That is a part of paying zakah, but that's not the purpose, the end goal of paying zakah, right? You're doing that by removing this portion of your wealth from your wealth. You're purifying your wealth, because zakah becomes, when the time for you to pay your zakah comes, zakah itself, or the part of your wealth that is zakah, is impure for you, right? It becomes impure for you. Like, you're not allowed to use that money. And for as long as it's staying in your wealth, then your whole of your wealth suffers from a lack of blessing. But when you remove that portion that's impure for you, then you purify your wealth. The rest of it, okay, now is wholesome and blessed for you to use. But this portion then goes on, right? And it goes on to then further other situations and causes. So it's very important to understand that. Okay, but the purpose is to develop and support others and develop the faith. And even when, as most of us will understand, one of the core elements of zakah is to alleviate people's poverty. So what has that got to do with progressing faith? We need to understand that Allah has asked us to help poor believers because their poverty can become a means for their belief to erode, their connection with the believing community to erode. If you have a club, a group of believers, and those who have the resources cannot support those who do not have the resources, then this club will be weakened. There will be no true sense of binding or unity in this particular group anymore. Okay, and this is one of the great wisdoms of zakat. When somebody is in a state of poverty where they don't know where their next meal is going to come from, they feel desperate about their situation, the mental stress and the practical difficulties that brings about means that their ability to be truly Muslim is compromised. So that's how you are upholding Islam and faith. So when you have to appreciate, when you're giving a poor person, a poor believer, money to eat or a roof over their head or that support, even if it is temporary, it provides that sense of connection, and it gives them a sense of like a freedom, right? That allows them, okay, to really think about the things that are important, because actually it's quite hard to think about the hereafter and planning for the hereafter and truly prospering in this life and the next if you're at that level of constraint. Okay, so it's very, very important for us to appreciate and understand that. Some of you are asking if we can see you. We can't see you, and don't worry, we can only see the screen, and me and Mahbub can see each other. That's about it. All right, so it's a human capital fund which seeks to empower individuals. It's important for us to understand that it goes beyond simply alleviation, but also to empowerment. It guarantees every struggling person a baseline provision and support to give them more opportunities to break out of the cycle of poverty. From a macroeconomic perspective, it's liquidity injections into the market. One of the wisdoms of zakat is that it gets money moving. It facilitates consumer spending, literally. So all of the things that you hear governments, treasury departments interested in economically, zakat is part and parcel of facilitating these processes. And of course, a social mechanism to look after one another and to grow together. There's so much to be said on the purposes of zakat, and I could speak about it all day long, and I love the subject, but that's another discussion. Today, it's very much about the technical components of the calculation, but those of you who know me know that I struggle to talk too much about the technical without some discussion on the meaningful aspects as well, and the substantial aspects. So important that we have covered that, and hopefully, it goes to when it comes to the act of giving, right? Your giving should be hopefully motivated in your intention. Make the intention. Let me just give you this one piece of advice. Yeah. When you come to give your zakat, make the intention. Say, Allah, I'm giving this zakat out of obedience to you, but because I want to further your deen. I want to support your deen. And this is my contribution to supporting your deen, right? Think about it in that way. It's a lot more of a powerful intention and a motivation than simply, oh, it's calculated, oh, I've got it done, and I feel relieved that I've got it done. Let me not think about it for another year. All right. Really have that intention behind your giving, inshallah, and that will be very beneficial. Okay. So let's get into the technicalities and and the calculation part of it. All right. One final reminder, because we've had more people join us in the last few minutes. One final reminder: if you want to make comments in the chat and you want others to see what you have to say, just address your comments to panelists and attendees. That little blue thing. I don't know why Zoom. I haven't been able to work this out. Okay. One of the few things about Zoom I haven't been able to work out is why they don't allow us to default to this. Okay. If it says to panelists only, it will only come to me and Mahbub, and that's you want everyone to see your comments and share. Okay. So who should pay zakah? Well, you have to be Muslim to pay zakah, all right? And you might think, well, why are you even making that point? Actually, classically, this was a discussion because in societies that were governed by Muslims and where there were others other than Muslims living in that society, the question came up, well, do they pay zakah as well? They said, no, they don't pay zakah. Okay, they pay other forms of taxation or what have you. Muslims pay zakah. Mental capacity and being an adolescent, meaning post-puberty. So now these three things are typically listed by the fuqaha, by the jurists, when they talk about the liability that someone has for a particular obligation. So in order to do your salah, you have to be a Muslim. You have to have the mental capacity, meaning to be liable, the mental capacity, and to be an adolescent, post-puberty, because pre-puberty, you're not subject, you don't have that liability, right? Even if you don't pray, it's encouraged to start praying earlier, but even if you don't, you're not liable. But after the age of puberty, then you are liable. However, this is the Hanafi opinion. Okay, the Shafi'i, Malik, and Hanbali schools, as mentioned here, they state, and this may come up later in the context of some questions, they say that even if the wealth is owned by someone who is mentally incapacitated or who is a minor, a child, then they say that that wealth is still subject to zakah, and the guardian or the parent or whoever the responsible person is, that they should still pay zakah on behalf of that person. So the Hanafis, they saw zakah is due on the individual first, and then we look at the wealth. So if the individual qualifies, okay, and they saw the conditions as the same as the other pillars, okay, same as salah and fasting, etc. So for zakah, whereas the others, because zakah involves wealth and money, right? They said no, as long as the money is there, even if the child is before puberty, but they have a savings account in their name, which goes beyond the nisab, which we'll cover the nisab in a second, then zakah should be paid. Now, this is a difference of opinion, which, we can't resolve here. I mean, this is like an age-old, centuries-old difference of views, okay? But I'm just laying that out for you so you can understand, and also that when you make choices about your calculation, you're making informed choices. Okay, oops. Yes. The next point is, what is the nisab? Okay, you may have heard this term, the nisab. Nisab is a threshold or a minimum for net zakatable assets at which zakah becomes due. All right. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, fine. So the net zakatable assets. Now, what do we mean by net zakatable assets? What we're going to look at in a second is when we look through the calculation, we're going to look at what do I have that is subject to zakah? What can I deduct? And then what's left? And then what's left is what I pay my 2.5% on. But what's left is your net zakatable assets. So your zakatable assets minus your liabilities and debts gives you a net zakatable assets. You then compare that figure to the nisab, this threshold. Now the threshold here, as you can see from the right-hand side, in those days, right, the transaction was being done in gold and silver. So there was a certain proportion of gold and a certain proportion of silver. If you had above that amount, then you would pay zakat. But if you had below that amount, you wouldn't pay zakat. Now at that time, roughly speaking, the weights of gold and the weights of silver, okay, were, in terms of what was then subject to zakah, were roughly similar in value. Whereas now, because gold and silver prices, and how all of that works is completely disconnected from, or based on different factors, I should say, than obviously what it used to be. We have and because now we are dealing in fiat money and pounds and pence or whatever currency, then gold and silver have two completely, the same weights, if you like, from that time, have two very different values. So then the question comes, which nisab should we use? So most people in the UK generally use silver. Yes, some scholars do advocate gold, right? But it is safer, right? So for example, if you have £1,000, better to pay £25 of zakat on £1,000 because you're above silver, even though you're below gold. Right, even if you had just under, let's just say, for example, even the gold measure went beyond £4,000, right? If you had £4,000 and let's say that was below the gold nisab, even then you're only paying £100. So better to pay £100 of zakat on 4,000, even if it were to be below the gold nisab. All right. So now zakah is payable when a person has wealth equaling or exceeding the threshold after one lunar year. Now let me. This is by the way, a really central point, okay, which often comes up in questions. whether you have had a certain portion of money or a certain portion of wealth for a whole year doesn't matter. Okay? You don't only pay zakah on wealth that you have had for the entirety of a year. You pay zakah on the wealth that you have today, as long as last year you were above the nisab, you had enough wealth, and over the course of the year you've had wealth. Then today I pay on what I have today. Okay, so for example, many of us, in terms of our income, will be receiving income on a monthly basis perhaps through salaried income. Okay, now when you receive a salary and you come to now the point of calculating your zakah, you don't say, oh, well, the salary I got 11 months ago, that was that one, then 10 months ago, 9 months ago, 8 months ago. So no, like that's all, whatever cash you've got left over from all of these salary payments, then you include it, right? So you don't say, oh, well, this last salary payment only came in a month ago or 2 weeks ago, perhaps. Well, I've only had it for 2 weeks. So do I include it? Most of us don't ask that question. Typically what we do, most people who I've seen over the years, they only ask this question when they get like a big amount of money in just before their zakat is due. And then they say, well, I haven't had it for a year. So do I need to pay zakat on it? Yeah, that doesn't matter. You've got it today. That's what matters. And we're going to look at some charts in a second to illustrate this. Okay. So to summarize, recommendation is go with the silver nisab. Recommendation is that based on your wealth today, on your zakah anniversary. So what is your zakah anniversary? This is very important, and this comes next. So when to pay zakah? Now, you can see here on the left-hand side, you've got an illustration of when it says the start of your hawl. Okay. So technically speaking, you determine your zakah anniversary, meaning the day on which you are supposed to calculate and pay your zakah. That is technically supposed to be determined by the first date in your life after the age of puberty that you owned the nisab for the first time. That technically becomes your date. All right. Now, most of us have no idea when that was, because most of us, we weren't having these conversations or even thinking about that amount, right? Or thinking about this issue. Maybe our parents were taking care of it on our behalf, or we weren't really thinking about it later, because unfortunately we have this idea that you only start paying zakah when you get a job, which is not true. It's nothing. Paying zakah and having a job are not connected. What you pay zakah when you have the wealth, right? Whether you were given the wealth, you inherited the wealth, you earned the wealth, it was from rental income, from benefits, it doesn't really matter, right? It's not about a job. It's about, have I got money? So you come above the nisab for the first time, okay? And 380 pounds currently is the current nisab value in silver. So the first time someone comes there, now the clock has started ticking. They don't pay zakah on that day. You pay zakah 1 year later on your zakah anniversary. So on the zakah anniversary, obviously over the course of the year, your wealth will go up and down, up and down, up and down, fluctuate. And then, you'll look 1 year later, am I still above the nisab? Yes, I am. Oh, I've got 400 pounds, still above the nisab. So I'm going to pay 2.5%, 10 pounds. Obviously, this is a very simplistic kind of scenario, but it's just to give you an illustration. So your zakah anniversary should be based on this. Now, if you do not know when the first time this ever happened, then you should choose a date in the lunar or the Islamic calendar, which becomes your zakah anniversary. And then that date is the date you stick with. So don't say, oh, I pay my zakah in Ramadan, and then just pay it at some point in Ramadan. No, you need a specific date, which becomes your calculation date. Because otherwise, how do you know you're making an accurate calculation? Because our financial situation fluctuates even within a few days. Sometimes you might make a big purchase in Ramadan, and then you have that money at the beginning, but you didn't have it at the end of Ramadan, right? Or you may receive a big, make a big sale if you run a business, for example, or earn a lot of money in Ramadan. So then, at the start of Ramadan, you didn't have that much, but towards the end, you had a lot. So if you don't have a specific date, right, you'll fall foul of the fluctuations. So you must be very clear on this. Have a specific date. And frankly, I'm telling you right now, if you do not have it has to be an Islamic date. If you do not have a zakat anniversary right now, I'm telling you, choose one now, like right now, choose it. You can make it today or tomorrow. Yeah. If 26th of Ramadan, 27th of Ramadan, 29th of Ramadan, whatever it is, right? First of Ramadan or whatever. It doesn't have to be Ramadan. By the way, this is another important point just of information. Technically, zakah and Ramadan have nothing to do with each other. Right? I know Muslims, we pay 80-90% of our zakah in Ramadan. I mean, technically, they're completely unrelated. All right. We just do it, perhaps, I don't know why, perhaps because we think, you know, just easy to remember, we feel reward and all of this stuff. But technically, zakah is just to be paid when it's to be paid. Okay. And so it's important. There's no merit in paying zakah in Ramadan over another date if actually it's due on another date. You can pay in advance, and I'll come to that later, perhaps if there's questions. Okay. But to be clear, maybe I'll just say this in summary, zakah can be paid on any day of the year, but it's calculated on one day of the year. All right. So if you want to start paying zakat over the course of a year, that's fine. But then when you come to your zakat anniversary, which is like the last day of your Islamic financial year, that's the way to think about it. You look at how much you've got left over. If you've already paid some zakat over the year, then you adjust for that, and then you pay whatever's left. Okay, and then that's it, and then you're done. All right. Now in this scenario here, the whole begins. Someone has gone above the nisab, but then next year, 1 year later, they are below the nisab, so there's no zakat to pay. Okay, and then so there's nothing to do right now, and then next year they check back on the same date and see where they are. The only exception to this scenario, okay, by the way, one thing to illustrate is that if, for example, in this scenario here, that let's just say there were fluctuations around the nisab, okay, so below the nisab, and then on the anniversary one was still above, that's okay, you still pay. So if you're fluctuating around the nisab, but you are still above the nisab at the end of the year. So a lot of people, that is their situation. For example, some people are just living month to month on their regular salary. I'm earning 2,000 a month. I'm spending 2,000 a month, or just under 2,000 a month. So actually, parts of a month I have 2,000. Parts of a month I literally have 10. And then the day before my salary of 2,000 comes in, and then I live again off that salary. And that's very common. I mean, it's a situation of many people, obviously, in the country. So the fact that they're fluctuating around the nisab is not relevant. Yeah, they'll still pay. The only time when that changes is if they go below zero, meaning they're actually in a situation of indebtedness, relative indebtedness. So their net zakatable assets is negative. All right. Technically here, the clock stops. And then you wait until you come above the nisab again, and then you start, the cycle begins again. And then on that same date, a year later, that's your new anniversary. So it's quite important actually to look at all of these things and monitor your financial situation relative to your zakat. Because if you don't do that, like honestly, you can just be paying randomly in sort of different times and places, and it can become a bit confusing, right, and confused. So if your nisab, it's not the nisab drops below zero, your net zakatable assets, yeah, your net, which we're going to look at now, your net zakatable assets, if that drops below zero, then the clock stops. You wait until your next, you come above the nisab again. On that date, a year later, your next zakat is due. So to be clear, 3 steps. We're going to look at what do we have, what do we owe. That gives you net zakatable assets. And then if your NZA, your net zakatable assets, is above the silver nisab, which is £380, your zakah will be 2.5% of your total net zakatable assets. All right. So you don't take off the nisab, just on the total. Okay. So many of us, maybe this discussion, you feel, okay, let's move on because, okay, I know I've got, I know I've got zakat to pay because mashallah, maybe your wealth is significant. Okay. But some people, when you actually look at, okay, what do I owe, and look at the liabilities and the debts, and people who are kind of in that middle zone, if you like, or perhaps not as wealthy, frankly, then, these things are important. So it's important. And anyway, regardless of our situation, it's important to be aware of these principles at least and understand them carefully, and especially this point about the zakat anniversary. It's important that you're very precise on that and you know. All right, let's now look at the various assets. So cash. Now, frankly, if we deal with cash properly, you'll deal with most issues, okay, because most of it is in cash. So zakah is payable on all cash assets in your ownership. It is not the case that zakah in your current account you do not look at, and zakah in your savings account you look at. No, as we said, whatever cash you have today, you include it today. That's it. All right, because whatever you have today is what you have left over after a year since you last pay your zakat, after a year of earning and spending and buying and selling, whatever you've been doing. Then a year later, this is what you have left over. This is my residual amount now at the end of this particular Islamic financial year. That's what I'm going to include in my calculation. So petty cash at home, as well as savings in the bank accounts, all currencies. Obviously, you can convert them. If you're going to pay zakat in one currency and you have multiple currencies, then you convert them. Similarly, I'm going to mention if you've got Bitcoin, right, and other such things, you include all of that too, right? You just convert it to the relevant pound amount. And that's a good example, by the way, of something where it's really important to know which date that you're calculating your zakat on, because Bitcoin is moving with such volatility, sometimes even within a day, right? But 1 month to the next or 1 week to the next, it's massive price shifts, right? So obviously you want to make sure that you give your zakat or calculate your zakat accurately. And if you do have a cryptocurrency from this year for the first time, we're actually accepting zakat in crypto. All right, the link is in the chat. Zakat is not payable on cash that has been spent before the zakat year end. Okay. So money that you've earned over the course of the year, but now you've spent it, well, obviously you're not including that. You're only including what you have today. Okay. So that's it. Okay. As far as cash is concerned. Now, zakat is basically cash or cash waiting to happen. Cash that I have now or cash that I'm expecting to realize. So money owed to you is cash that you are expecting. Okay. Expecting. Now, not all cash, we're going to look at that now, but that's basically what zakat is due on. What you have now, cash that you have now, or cash that you are expecting, or you have a high degree of expectation around. And then we're going to break that down now. So receivables that are zakatable for all outstanding years, all right? Loans advanced with the hope of repayment. So you have lent someone money and you remain hopeful that you will be repaid, even if they will repay you at some point in the future, even if there is not a particular date. But I've lent my brother £2,000. I've lent my friend £5,000. Okay, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You've lent, or maybe you gave Qard Hassan to the masjid. Okay, you've lent the mosque. Okay, £1,000, whatever it is, and you're expecting it back. You still have hope of repayment. You include that today in your zakah. And the person who owes money to another individual, they deduct that from their calculation, which we'll look at later on. Okay, so that way, that's how it's done. The creditor pays, the debtor deducts. Okay, well, it makes sense. If you've sold commercial goods, right, or you sold services as a business, and you're waiting for the invoices to be paid, right, then you will include that even though you haven't yet received the money. Again, as long as they remain good invoices, you're like, there's no reason for you to expect that you're not going to be paid. You will include that now. Now, one may pay zakah before receipt of the loan. All right. So, for example, let's say you've lent someone £100,000, okay, and now you yourself are in a bad financial situation. So, zakah on £100,000 is £2,500. You may not be able to pay that right now. So you can pay it now. If you can, that's good. If you can't, then let's say the person pays you back in 3 years' time. You get your £100,000 back in 3 years' time. 3 zakat anniversaries pass. Then I will pay at that point how much? 7,500. Okay, for each year, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. I can wait for the money to come back, and then I pay the zakah for the previous years as required. You don't have to include money that you've lent where you've given up, right? You're contacting them, you've WhatsApped them, you called them, they've blocked you, right? Then you have no idea, basically, right, of you have no idea of zakat, of the fact that when they're going to pay you back. Yeah, you've no idea when you're going to pay. So you don't include that. Outstanding invoices for the sale of personal items. So it's a technical point, frankly, but here scholars consider this to what's called like a weak receivable. All right. Whereas commercial contracts and payments and stuff, they see as stronger, and that's why to include those. So again, you can do it on the level of expectation. If you actually sold something on a personal basis, but you have a high expectation of receiving the money, you can include that too. Wages, fees, remuneration of services, you don't include. So I don't include my next wage that I'm expecting. Similarly, if you are a lady and dowry is owed to you but has not been paid to you yet, you do not include it yet. Similarly, if someone has passed away and you're expecting inheritance but you haven't got it yet, you won't include that. So these are kind of weak receivables, things that you're expecting. You may have a high expectation about, but there's still degrees of uncertainty involved. Whereas the other ones on the top are ones that you will include. There is a question about please can you post a reference about money that you have, which we have now, which your zakat is on. I was taught that zakat is paid after it's in your possession for a lunar year. I will politely respond and say, please provide your reference as to why zakat should be paid on money that you've only had for a year and not on money that you have now. Because, yeah, anyway, this is clear. This is something which, is a scholarly backed position for years. So I will mention that much for now, and then we can inshallah pick it up later on. All right, gold and silver. Gold and silver. Hanafi view. Hanafi view is gold or silver, whichever form is subject to zakah, even if they're worn or stored. So in the view of the Hanafis, whether you have a gold bar that's sitting in your attic, okay, or you have a gold ring that you're wearing, you include it all. The other schools, they say if it's used as a personal item, right? So if a lady is, for example, has a gold ring, a gold necklace, and she wears it, she uses it. Even if it's like, gold sets, which are only for special occasions, right? But you wear them occasionally just for those special occasions. Then they say there's no zakat due because it's not a store of wealth. And this is the reason for this kind of controversy or this issue is because obviously at that time, gold and silver were both the currencies or the items or the means of the transaction, as well as the kind of, if you like, the metals for your kind of jewelry items, etc., etc. Whereas now, of course, those two things have become slightly, separate. We're not dealing in gold anymore, okay, in terms of our basic transactions. But it's become like a commodity, either because you're investing as a commodity or you have the jewelry. Now, what you need to ask yourself is, how do you see your jewelry? Do you see your jewelry as a store of wealth? Like it's the sort of, I say, as a joke, right? It's like the South Asian pension fund. We keep our jewelry stored away for a rainy day. Frankly, I mean, the whole world has to fall down before we consider selling the jewelry, right? Oftentimes. But that's actually what it is in our mind. It's not about the like wearing them or the items. It's just, I know I've got 30,000 pounds of jewelry, and this gives me peace of mind that I have 30,000 pounds sitting, in jewelry in my house. That's not the case for me, by the way, but I'm just saying, right? Someone might think that. Now, where you see it as a store of wealth, it is subject to zakah, and everybody agrees it's subject to zakah. Okay. But where the difference is that if you're just wearing it and you see it as another item, right? Like your clothes and your car and your house and your bag or whatever, just as another personal item of personal use, then the majority say you do not need to include those. Obviously, the safer view or the conservative view is to just include a lot of it. Now, one thing to say is that you should use the scrap value, yeah? Or what do I mean by that? How much would a jeweler pay you? Yeah, so when now that's usually around 15-20% less than the commodity kind of live gold price. Yeah, you don't need to evaluate your jewelry on the basis of live gold price, because you would never get the live gold price for your jewelry. Yeah, you will just get whatever the jeweler will pay you. So you can call a jeweler, or online you can find the scrap values which are available. And if it's mixed metals, then it's zakatable according to the proportion of gold and silver. So many of you, I know there's always questions about, what if I've got stones in my jewelry and all of this kind of stuff. What you need to do one time is take your jewelry to a jeweler. I know that hasn't been easy to do over the last year, but I think presumably they're opening up now. That you take your jewelry to the jeweler and you get them to tell you what is the exact gold weight, okay, of my jewelry, okay, and the carats. Then write that down, make a note of it, and okay, maybe on a piece of paper and stick it in with the set, for example, right? Or put it in a spreadsheet, whatever. And then when the time comes to calculate your zakah, you evaluate it on that basis. You say, okay, I know I've got 143 grams of 22 karat gold. So what's the scrap value or the buying price for 22 karat gold? Oh, it's X per gram. Multiply that through by 143 grams. Now you know what your zakatable amount of gold is, okay? Because they've already adjusted for stones and everything else. Okay, so you need to have that happen. If you've never done that, it's quite hard to make that assessment. In which case, you might just want to take the full weight for now and deal with that later. Okay. All right. Stock and inventory. So that any business people, anything that you buy with the intention of sale is subject to zakah. So stock and inventory is to be valued at the retail price for zakah purposes. Businesses will typically have the following zakatable assets: cash, receivables, stock, inventory, raw materials. So we've already covered cash and receivables. So now stock. So stock is what? Cash waiting to happen, right? So all of your stock is subject to zakah. Now, one thing, it gets complicated, obviously, and we provide support with this for people who are running businesses and they need help to kind of really, to get into the details of these issues, and we can support with that at National Zakah Foundation. It's important to say that obviously there are certain costs that are involved or inherent to the sale. So because we know if we have an item, we sell it for £1,000, then we know for a fact, if we know for a fact there are certain fees or there are certain costs directly involved in that sale, then we can adjust for those. So for example, there's a question about, if I'm selling on eBay or Amazon or any of these things, straight away, before the money's even come to me, they're already deducted their fees. So if I've got £1,000 worth of stock, but I know that I'm only going to receive £800 for selling £1,000, then obviously I will only account for £800. Yeah, not the whole £1,000, of course. So what's not included? Okay, goodwill and other intangible assets, so intangibles. Okay, property, plant, and equipment. So your fixtures and fittings, your computers, these things, they're not included. And capital goods and fixed assets. So you don't include any of these things in your Zakah calculation. Zakah is, remember, cash waiting to happen. We have a free business Zakah guide. Maybe perhaps Mahbub, you can put the link to the Zakah guide in the chat. Thank you. Yeah, you've done that. Thank you very much. Okay, so people can download that if you've got a business. There's more details on businesses. Okay, property and fixed assets. Now, actually, again, property and fixed assets is very simple. There's actually, technically speaking, nothing to say about property and fixed assets other than what we've already covered. Because think about the principles. There's nothing inherently zakatable about property. Property in and of itself is not inherently subject to zakah, right? So frankly, there's no difference between a property, a house, and a pen. Is a pen inherently subject to zakah? No. Well, then neither is a property, right? There's only one thing that can possibly make a property and a pen subject to zakah. And that is if you have bought the property or the pen or anything with the sole intention of selling that thing, right? So it comes down to intention. There's no zakah on the house in which you live. There's no zakah on a house that you own that you're renting out, okay? Except on the surplus rental income, but we've already covered that because we said cash. Regardless of the source of cash, you're going to include it. So we've already dealt with that. There's only zakah on the value of the property that is bought with the intention of sale. When I say bought with the intention of sale, I mean the only reason you bought the property is to sell the property. I bought the property at 100,000. I'm going to do it up, get it sorted out, sell it for 140. If that's the reason you bought, and that's your motivation, for as long as that is your motivation, then the entire property value you include in your zakatable assets. But you will not include, or you will adjust, of course, then if you financed it with debt, with a mortgage or whatever, then you will adjust for that too. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. So in that regard, a house is like a pen, is like a car, is like anything else. All right, it's just the fact that someone has 15 houses. Okay, you've got 15 houses, I might have 15 pens. That doesn't mean that those things are subject to zakah. Okay. Rental property, as I've said, is right here. Okay, so on a house that you own, it's all going crazy now. On the house that you own, that you're renting out only, right? Or you're renting out except on the surplus rental income. So that's it. You just deal with whatever you've got left over from the rental income. Okay, let's move on. Shares, unit trust, equity investments. Again, a very similar notion, a similar idea, but there is something inherently subject to zakah when it comes to shares. Okay, this is why shares are a little bit complicated, right? Either we have this active trading, a buy to sell strategy or an approach. Okay, so where you are purchasing your shares with the same intention, the same motivation as someone who's only buying property to sell, as someone who's running a business that is a goods or a stock-based physical goods business. Why is a person who is running a physical stock business or a goods business, why are they buying stock? Only to sell it. There's no other reason. So if you're only buying shares with the intention of sale, and that's it, and nothing else, then you pay zakat on the market value, as is mentioned here. Okay? Now, any other motivation or mixed motivations, right? Because obviously, no one buys shares hoping they're going to go down. All right? You buy things, you hope whatever you buy, it goes up in value. But that's not the point. The point is that if you've got mixed motivation, so for example, you want to have different parts of your assets or your wealth in different asset classes to manage the portfolio that you have a bit better. That yes, partly, obviously, I want the price to go up, but that's not my main kind of thing right now. Maybe you want dividend income, because actually owning shares might be able to give certain types of shares might give you a stable 5, 6, 7% dividend income, right, every year. So here we don't pay zakah on the market value, but when you own a share, an equity, you're owning a portion of a business. And because, as we looked at before, businesses themselves are subject to zakah because of their cash and their receivables and their stock, etc. Because you own a portion of something which is inherently subject to zakah, then you need to pay on the underlying assets, okay, of the business relative to your proportionate holding. Now, long story short, we've done analysis of like dozens and dozens of companies and stocks and looked at their balance sheets and market values and all of this stuff. We recommend a proxy of 25%. So what does that mean? It means if I own £10,000 of equities, of shares, perhaps in an ISA or whatever else, and it's, it's basically a savings product, a way to just, manage my wealth and what have you, then I don't pay on £10,000, but I should pay on 25% on £10,000. Why? To represent or to give as a proxy for the underlying assets that are sitting in the businesses in which I am a shareholder now, or I have made I'm a shareholder or a beneficiary of. Okay, so that's the point. Because you see, if the managers or the owners of businesses in which we buy and sell shares, if they were paying zakah on an annual basis, we wouldn't have to worry about this, because zakah is being paid from within the companies in which we own shares, right? So if management were paying the zakah on behalf of a firm, as they should be, right, then there's nothing to worry about. But since we own a share, as Muslims, as believers, we own a share of a business which is not paying zakah on the assets of the business, at least we should do our part, which is the thinking now, the point. All right, so hopefully that's clear. Okay, pension schemes, right? Just before you thought it couldn't get any worse, you go on to pensions. So pensions is a tricky kind of area and a confusing area for many people. And there's still, I think, there's still more research and more thought to be kind of given to this whole area, because there are various complexities of it, no doubt. But in principle, our advice on this is that zakah is due on all defined contribution schemes, okay, whether SIPs, AVCs, personal pensions, stakeholder pensions. Okay, why is this the case? First of all, the fact that you can or cannot access your wealth right now actually is not what determines whether you should pay zakah on it. And by the way, we've already looked at examples where we're saying, yeah, we should pay zakah on a certain thing, or we owe zakah on a certain thing, even if we don't have it with us right now, or we can't deploy it in the way that we want to. So we said, for example, if you've lent someone money, you pay zakah, even though you've lent them the money, they've got the money, they're making use of the money, but you pay zakah because it's your asset, you own it. And in the case of a pension, just because you've put money into a wrapper that just prevents your access, that's not the issue. The issue is that money dead money or is it active money? That's actually the key thing. In the classical works of fiqh, right, they would talk about the fact that, if someone has basically buried some treasure somewhere and now they've forgotten where it is, do they need to pay zakah? They're still theirs, but they just can't access it. They'll say, no, they don't need to pay zakah because they don't have it. They can't make use of it. But the point is not about access, just can I do what I want? The point is about, is it being productive on your behalf? Now, the point is we're putting money into a pension precisely because someone is going to manage this pot for us, invest in this and that and the other, and grow this pot for us. It's still wealth in our name. And especially with defined contribution schemes, because at any point in time, you can log in online or speak to your, if it's through your company pension or whatever, speak to your HR department, and you can find out precisely how much wealth you have sitting in your pension right now. There is a precise amount that you own today, okay? Whereas with other forms of pension schemes, like final salary schemes, career average schemes, et cetera, a little bit like also, our state contributions to, say, national insurance, right? And the fact that we're going to get state pension at some stage, we don't count these, precisely because there is no amount of wealth that we can say with precision is owed to, or we own today. And zakah is paid on what you have in your possession. So if you're paying into a pot, and at some stage down the future, some calculation will be made about what it is that you own, but today you don't own anything specific, right? Then it's still questionable, like what it is that you actually have in your possession, which is why we can't say it's subject to any form of zakah. Where it's very different in the other scenario. So this is the thinking behind it. Now, if you have a pension scheme, again, there are proxies, okay, to be applied. So if it's a direct property fund, 15%. If it's a Sharia compliant fund, 26%. If it's an equity fund, 27%. If it's a whole mixture of stuff, 50%. And if it's pure bonds and fixed income, which probably from a Sharia perspective is a bit problematic, then we'll say 100%. Okay. there's a lot goes on behind calculating these figures. Again, that's for another time, but leave it just to keep it simple for now. This is what you would, what would happen, or how you would apply it. Okay, so if you have all of your pension is invested in an equity funds, and you have £100,000 in your pension, then you will take 27% of 100,000, which is 27,000, and 2.5% on 27,000, which is, I don't know, 700 and something, for argument's sake. Okay. Okay, so now we've covered everything that we need to add, okay, on these asset sides, zakatable assets. Now we look at liabilities. What do I take off? So the following debts can be deducted from your gross zakatable assets. Number one, arrears. So any arrears or overdue payments, anything that I owe today. So just as we said, whatever you have today, okay, whatever you have today, okay, is what you include. Similarly, whatever you owe today, already owe, you can deduct. So overdue energy bill, right? Or an overdue rent payment, okay? Or you have bought something from somebody, okay, but you haven't, or you've acquired the good, but you haven't yet paid the invoice, okay? Or any invoice that you owe for a service that you have benefited from. Okay, so this is money that is owed. It's not yours anymore because it is owed already. You can deduct. And then only if necessary, incur debts payable in full within 12 months and up to 12 months installments of long-term liabilities. So technically speaking, okay, the easiest way to think about mortgages, for example, especially, and student loans and all these other types of things, is basically not to think about them, right? You don't make any deduction for them. Only if necessary, okay, then there is an argument to say, and scholars may sometimes make the argument that you should be allowed to deduct some of these liabilities that are future liabilities. And some of them say then up to 12 months worth. Okay. But our recommendation is that you don't do that unless you need to. Now, why would you need to do that? You would need to do that if your ability to, if paying your zakah means that somehow you're going to be unable to meet those obligations, right? Or if your ability to meet those obligations is like significant strain or stress. So for example, if somebody has most of the zakah that they need to pay is actually because of illiquid assets, right? Things that they cannot access right now. For example, stock that they haven't yet sold, or the pension thing, or money that is owed to you, but you don't have. So actually cash-wise, you're quite poor, but you've got lots of these other assets which you can't access right now. So your zakah bill is higher than maybe even your cash amount, right? So but then you've got next month's debt payment to pay, or some other things to pay. Okay, then these become deductible in this kind of scenario, okay, under some degree of necessity. But otherwise, they shouldn't be included. I mean, to give you a really simple example, if someone's got £10,000 worth of mortgage payments over the next 12 months, that only makes the difference today of £250 of the amount of zakah they would pay if they didn't deduct anything. But if they deduct 12 months worth of £10,000, right, then they are, for many people, the calculation will say, okay, you don't owe any zakah at all. But actually, it was only a question of paying £250. And is us paying £250 really likely to affect our ability to meet £10,000 worth of mortgage obligations over the next year? Probably not. Okay, so this is the way to think about this. All right, so it's almost time for questions now. Alhamdulillah, we're just before 6 o'clock. So for the first time in my life on a zakah calculation session, I'm roughly on time. So what I thought we'll do though first is quickly show you a live demo of how you will do this, practically speaking, using the NZF calculator. So I'm just going to share another screen very quickly, and inshallah just demonstrate this quickly. So this is the NZF homepage or website, and we will click here on calculate. All right, and then you've got some information here, and press calculate your zakah. All right, so this is how it works. So I'm ready to work out my zakah. Okay, so start calculation. So here you'll select everything as we've discussed, right? Cash, money owed to me, gold, silver, shares, pensions, ISAs, crypto, business assets, money owed on mortgage bills, overdraft, etc. So let's go through it. So it's calculation. So you enter so let's just for argument's sake say, okay, right, I've got £10,000 of cash in hand. Well, probably not actually. That's not very realistic, is it? Maybe even 1,000 is. Well, historically, I remember in years gone by, sometimes people, they come have come and they said, here's my zakat. And they have this brown envelope and it's got lots of money in it. And yeah, a bit money laundering issues with that one. Anyway, cash in bank account, let's say £10,000. You now move to money owed to me. So let's say, for example, I've lent someone, okay, £1,200, and I'm expecting that they are going to pay me back. And money expected from a sale, well, let's say I've sold a car or something, and I'm waiting for the money to come through. So that's worth, say, 3,400. All right. Gold and silver. So now here, what you can do is you can either do the calculation that we have done before or explained, and then put in your pound figures, okay? Or you can just change it to grams and then put in the weight. All right. So let's say I've got 21 grams of gold. All right. But silver, I know that actually the amount of zakatable silver is 123, for example. Fine. So we can do both of these and it will automatically sort this out. All right. Shares. So if shares bought exclusively to resell for capital gain, okay, let's say I'm trading in shares and I've bought a particular share because I think that share price is going to do really well in the next month or so, right? I bought £1,000 of that, but then I have an ISA. In my ISA, I've got, say, £2,345, okay? And that's, sitting elsewhere, right? Or got mixed motivations for that one. Okay, pension. Now here, typically, I don't know the amount of my pension on which zakat is payable. That's very typical. So now here, what you do is you can then choose from this drop down, okay, what your scheme is. You just need to know what scheme you have. All right. You just need to know what scheme you have. So if you've got, I've got a Sharia compliant scheme, and you know that the value of the pension is 75,635. Then that's it. You just put that in there, right? And it will do the calculation. All right. Let's say this doesn't apply to you. I don't have any of this stuff, junior ISAs, child trust funds, etc. We'll come to children's things later. But I mentioned earlier, you have to just make a decision about, are you going to pay zakat on the wealth of your minor children or not? Okay, the majority say you should. Hanafi says you don't have to. So that's, you make your choice basically. And then accordingly, you'll fill this in. Crypto, I don't have any Bitcoin, unfortunately. But let's say, I have, £1,234 of Bitcoin. And then business assets, right? So I'm not going to put anything in here, but let's say you own a business. How much cash do I have in the business? What's owed to me in the business? How much stock do I have? Okay. And now money I owe. So as it says here, for long-term debts, mortgage payments and bills only enter amounts that are either due now or overdue. For businesses, any tax liabilities in relation to a prior financial year that are still to be paid can also be deducted. And then here, I just want to read this because it's important. So as long as you're confident that paying your zakat today will not affect your ability to meet your debt repayments over the coming year, then you should not make deductions for any future repayments now. But if you're worried that you will not be able to meet any of your upcoming obligations within the next month, then these can be deducted, right? So this is the advice typically at the moment. So let's just say, for example, yes, I have an overdue mortgage payment, right, of £2,400, for example, okay? Overdue gas bill, okay, £450, okay? One account is an overdraft to the tune of £1,200, all right? If I've got, in the business, okay, I took on some business financing and I owe the money now, okay? I have payments back, and that's like, say, £12,000, for example. Okay. I think earlier I didn't put, okay, let's say the business has £3,000 of cash, right? But I owe £12,000, etc. Credit card bills, whatever, personal loans, right? All of this stuff. So you've done all this. Continue, right? So now this will do all the calculations. So what I have, £42,000 and 93, meaning the zakatable assets, minus what I owe, okay, 16,050. So that's the net zakatable assets is 26,000. Right, obviously it's above today's nisab, which is 387. So my zakah is 2.5%. Okay, so my zakah is 2.5%. Now, just before we go back, I want to very quickly illustrate to you and just to take a moment just to show you, okay, on NZF, like what we do and how it works from here. Because after this, what you do is continue. All right, and you have the choice because a lot of people round up their zakah. So we just thought we'd make this easy for people. Say, actually, you know what? Let's just pay 700 to keep it safe. Right, £700. Now it's time to give zakah. Now, as you can see, straight away here on the right-hand side, we show you exactly how your zakah is going to be used. All right. And you have the ability then, you can add zakat al-fitr and fidya, etc. You can say, okay, I'll let NZF decide, which is recommended allocation, or I want to choose how my zakah is used. So you can click here. And then you have, first of all, this question around how do you want the cost to be covered? If you want 100% zakah, then all £700 to go, because we use up to 10% for the amilin, the administrators. All right, so let's just say, okay, I want to add £70 because I want 100% zakah policy. Fine. Now here, you can then decide what to do. So you can spread this equally, or you can decide, actually, you know what? I want hardship relief, I want 413, housing and work, I want you know, 59% of it to go there, but then education, I don't want to spend any on that. Fine. Okay, that's what you want to do. Then you have your other choices about sadaqah, etc. Yes, do some gift aid, right? And then it's all there, and all the details are there, etc., etc. So this is just to illustrate to you, okay, how it works and how it functions. Okay, I'm going to go back, inshallah, and inshallah we're going to get straight into the questions very, very shortly. Let's just go here, play from the current slide. Okay, this just lays out for you. So today, you know, National Zakah Foundation, we've basically done part of the left-hand column. But then what we do, as we've just illustrated, is that we give you the opportunity to give your zakah locally, right, to various funds: hardship relief fund, housing fund, work fund, education fund. Okay, allocate to how you want. We will then administer that zakah. Okay, we'll distribute that zakah. Apply people applying to us for help. We verify the applications, and then we administer it on your behalf, and then we track the zakah. So we will tell you exactly when your zakah has been distributed and who it's gone to, because we have a queue of payers, and in the order that the money comes in, then we distribute it on your behalf in the order that it comes in, and then we have a queues of applicants and recipients. So effectively, we're just matching you together in the order that you come in on both sides, so that your zakah is connecting with someone around the country that really needs that that support. And then we have this feature called Zakah Live, and I just want to mention this actually. Last thing, if I meant to have done that here actually, but I just want to mention this before we then take on the questions. Which is that one thing that we have here on the impact section of the Zakah website is something called Zakah Live. So this is mashallah, like a unique feature which we brought around recently, and it tells you a huge amount of what is going on around the country. So here you can see exactly what is going on. This heat map is exactly a representation of what has been happening, okay, as it says here, over the last 12 months. So it tells you exactly over the last 12 months, we've had 3.36 million of zakah come in. We've distributed £4 million of zakah, right? We've helped 15,113 people. Now, if I want to see, let's see the number of people helped. Now I want to zoom in, right? I want to look at what's going on. Luton, 124 people have been supported in Luton over the last 12 months, right? The Vale of White Horse, I have never heard of this place, right? 6 people have been helped from the Vale of White Horse. In Brent, 755 people have been supported. Okay, let's look up here. Birmingham, 887 people over the last year have been supported, right? In Manchester, 578 people. Salford, 108, right? Leeds, 350. Bradford, 450. Look here, a Muslim applied for the hardship relief fund. 26 minutes ago, we just got an application. Okay, someone has just applied for zakah 26 minutes ago, right? So all of this is there, clear. You can look at it in pound terms, right? How much is being given. You can look at it in how much is going out, pound terms, and you can look at it all together. So I'm just going to leave that. A family of 2 applied for zakah 12 minutes ago. Just 12 minutes ago, family of 2 have applied for zakah. Now, this is what makes it real, right? Because look at you now, givers, potential givers on one end, right? Thinking about calculating how much to give, literally at the same time as you literally are seeing, right? These people are now coming in and applying. Now, SA from Luton just gave £500 of zakah. So alhamdulillah, now, this is now how zakah is becoming live. So look at this. 14 minutes ago, SA from Luton gave £500 of zakah, and 12 minutes ago, a family of 2 applied. Now, if that family of 2 is in need, inshallah, these 2 things are connected, bang, and you have the givers and recipients, right? And it's all connected, which is exactly how it should be. And I just want to kind of illustrate this, you know. Let me tell you one thing. I'm not going to get too much into this unless there are questions on it, right? On the whole local versus international issue about zakah. But let me just explain one thing to you, or put it really briefly. It doesn't matter what we do for people around the world if the people in our very own community and society, they do not have, or we leave them unsupported. Allah will ask us about them. Allah will ask us about the asylum seekers in this country who need our help. He will ask us about the single mothers who are desperately struggling, okay, who need our help. All of these people who are applying to us for zakah, right? The £4 million that we've distributed over the last year, it hasn't just gone to anyone here or there. No, it's gone to people who've been rigorously checked to see, like, are these people in difficulty and poverty? And I can tell you the stories that you come across of people in severe difficulty and poverty are very extreme. And yes, we can say, other people are suffering more, but that's not the point. You're not equivalently responsible for every human on earth, right? But we all have a responsibility to those who are around us as a starting point. So whatever you do, even if you want to split your zakah, you spend some zakah here and sadaqah elsewhere, whatever you do, just make sure that in your giving of zakah, at least you have made some allocation for the people in your own community, because this is telling you in as clear as we ever have. And then under here, all the stories, right? All real true stories of individuals, okay, who have, you know, been really supported by this. And remember what I said at the beginning, the real meaning of this, or the value of this, is us telling them we are fellow Muslims. We truly are. It's not just like a claim. We're a community, you know. Sometimes we bang on about unity and community, but actually, what unity and community? I mean, if the person is struggling, you know, literally hungry in my own locality. I mean, right, I live in Sutton in South London. Okay, I know for a fact through the local masjid where I'm a trustee at the moment, right, there's dozens and dozens of families. Just they need help for iftar. I mean, if somebody is in need of iftar packs, right, in this country, if Muslims in this country are queuing at food banks, which they are, and they have been, no, we need to be there for them and support them, right? Where Islam and Muslims are suffering, where we live, we are firstly responsible for dealing with that issue. It's very important. It's very important. And you know what? If you want to think about, like we think about everything else, what's safer in the eyes of Allah? I'm telling you right now, it's a lot safer in the eyes of Allah to be able to stand in front of Allah and say that I gave my zakah, and those who are in need right around me, I made sure that they were dealt with and supported and helped, than to be able to say, yes, I did this left, right, and center all over the world, but my own literally neighbor, okay, there were people in my own community and society I did nothing for. You're going to be in a risky position, frankly. So do bear that in mind. It is a serious issue, and inshallah, that way we will fulfill our obligations in the best possible way. All right, time for your questions. And in the meantime, I'll just leave that there. All right, bismillah. So let's go. 103. So shall we try and get through 103 questions?
Thank you, Brother Iqbal. There. Before we start the Q&A, there, we're going to have a mini poll launched for the duration of the Q&A. So please, everyone, all 174 of you, fill in these questions. It should take a few seconds. So I'm going to launch this now. Before we start with Q&As. How do you want to do this, Iqbal? Shall we choose from the most upvoted one downwards, or?
Yeah, I'm just going to go from the top.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so I'm launching the poll now.
That's fine. Cool. Thanks. All right, cool. Thank you. All right, bismillah. So do you have to pay zakah on a student loan? Well, think about it. What are we really asking here? What we're asking is, do we have to deduct? Or if you're saying money that you have received from a student loan, okay, if you're talking about that, and do we include that money? Then the answer is yes. Why is the answer yes? Because today, do I have cash from the student loan? Yes, I do. And then you look at the liability side and you say, well, do I owe the money today? Well, if you're a student at university and you received money, okay, by way of a loan, technically speaking, today, there's no liability on you whatsoever. So even though we call it a student loan, right now you've been given the money. Yes, you're going to owe it at some stage, but based on certain conditions. The reality today is you have certain money, right? And in the future, you may or may not pay that money back. But right now, do you have it? Yes, you do. Do you include it? Therefore, yes, you do. You don't include the whole amount of your student loan. You just include whatever you have, your cash today. All right, that's done. I need to know how to calculate my jewelry as some contain diamonds and it puts weight on the gold. Okay, so as we said, adjust. Okay, adjust for it. I've just completed my divorce and financial agreement. May Allah make things easy for you. I've not received any money yet. I'm having to pay zakah for that. No, you do not pay zakah on that. So that's an example of like a weak receivable. You don't know yet, right? It's not like hasn't been completely done and dusted and finalized. You haven't received the money. When you receive the money, then yes, you would include it. Would my share in a company be subject to zakah? Yes, it would, as we discussed. Okay, you look at the underlying assets of the company. Okay, you make a calculation for the zakatable assets, and then you pay your share, your proportion. Do I have to minus the owing I have as bills have not been sent to me before zakat? Yeah, so you don't deduct any future bills, okay, that you you don't deduct for future bills. All right. I'm 21. I've never paid zakah before. How do I calculate the years that I missed? Okay, very good. So very important issue. We have a whole section on our website, Mr. Zakah. Just now I showed you the website. If you go on it now, nzf.org.uk, maybe Mahbub, you can just post a link. Okay, there's a section on the website on Mr. Zakah. So what do you do? All right, it's a long story, but basically, so check out the link. So basically what you do is that you revisit the previous years, okay? And you pay zakah on the previous years, okay? You pay zakah on the previous years as if you were paying it at that time. So you need to go take a trip back through memory lane, bit of a back to the future kind of thing, right? And then you calculate accordingly. So do the same calculation but for those previous years. And the main thing I just want to say is that zakat anniversary that you decide on, right? You just apply it backwards. Okay, you apply it backwards. I just want to remind you guys, please don't paste questions in the chat because I'm not going to get to those ones. Okay, put them in the Q&A. I think I've miscalculated zakah in the past, but I can't remember by how much. What should I do? Should I make it up? And if yes, how? Yes, if you think that you have not paid zakah properly in the past, based on, for example, this discussion, then just make an assessment of, you have to just come as close as possible and make a proxy of how much do I think I've paid, or know that I've paid? How much do I think I owe, right? Based on a fresh calculation of the past. And then whatever the difference is, make, as close as possible as you can come. Because look, we will all know, like, there's a certain maximum amount of wealth. We know we've never had more than a certain amount, right? And we'll know, hopefully, that there's a certain amount of zakah that I've given in the past, or I've never given more than X amount. So even if you have any really loose information, you can come up with a rough estimation of what the gap is. If you know it more precisely, that's better. Okay. Is zakah payable on an additional property that is empty and not generating an income? So if you've just happen to have a property, and it's not about, haven't bought the property to sell it, or like it's not like a trading asset, then no, it's just sitting there, and then you just have it. I have a money purchase pension invested in a Sharia fund. It is building a sizable value. I don't have access to this money to retirement. NZF say I must pay zakah on 26% of the pension fund every year. This will cause me difficulty as I have very limited cash savings. How do I practically pay zakah in this scenario, as my fund will become very big in the years ahead? Even if I defer payment until I have access at retirement, that will be a huge sum to pay at retirement. Even then, I'll never have full access to the whole pension, as I only have access to 25% of the fund by retirement, with the rest used to typically buy an annuity. Are there other opinions that zakah is only payable at retirement, i.e. 2.5% at retirement? Yes, on pensions, there are different views, no doubt. There are different views, so that's all I can say. If you, I think the logic behind why zakah is due on the scheme and the way it's calculated, I think it's a sound logic, and it's consistent with logic on other aspects where we will happily accept that zakah is due. So the issue becomes one of, look, let's put it this way, right? Let's put it this way. If I have an equity portfolio, and I have access to the equity portfolio, but every year, if you agree that you have to pay every year on an equity portfolio, and let's say 25% of that portfolio. So then I ask you, then what's the difference then? If every year you accept, and let's say just through discipline alone, I don't sell anything, I'm not selling anything. Through discipline alone, I keep it for all those 25, 30 years. And every year I'm paying the zakah, then you pay the zakah, like it's owed. So similarly, where this other scheme exists, it might bring up the question for us as to whether how effective is a pension scheme specifically as it is right now for us, as part of the way that we plan for our future and everything else, relative to other ways of planning for your future. There are other ways. I mean, the pension scheme is not the only way to plan for your future retirement. There are different ways of doing so. Yeah, many different ways. So that's something for you to decide. But I think the logic, to me, feels fairly clear, and something we've looked at for years. And obviously, it's not just me. Our scholars have looked at it and argued the case for it. So that's what it is. So it depends. Different people's situation is different. And the access, you say 25%, I think what you're referring to is you have tax-free access. But technically, you have access to all of it. You might have a tax implication at that stage, fine, but you have tax-free access to all of it. So I do get it. I empathize with what you're saying. But I think that I think that the case is what I've mentioned. And I see in the chat that someone is saying you're exposed to more risk in a DC scheme than a DB scheme. Yeah, that's right. But guess what? You're exposed to more risk if you keep your money in cash versus buy equities, right? You pay 2.5% of one, but only effectively 0.8 something percent of the other, or whatever it is, 0.7 or something. Yeah. So if you've got tons of gold, right, then according to the Hanafis, you're at risk. Okay. Whereas if you have tons of diamonds, you're not. So that's just the way it is. I mean, we can only say based on the logic, our aim here is not to say and by the way, it's not problematic for you to manage your wealth in such a way that manages your zakat. That's not a problem. So if you want to manage your wealth in a way that you take zakat into account, you take other considerations into account, that's fine as well, by the way. In fact, Umar radiallahu anh is known for having said that to tell the guardians of the orphans' wealth that don't let their wealth be eaten up by zakah. What did he mean? He said, invest the wealth of the orphans. Don't just let it sit there and stand there. right? But by the time they become to maturity, and this, by the way, is one of the evidences that is used to support the idea of paying for zakah for minor children as well. Okay, so quite important. So hopefully this gives you a sense, inshallah. All right. If I got a scholarship and got a large sum of money, would that be zakatable wealth? Yes. Can you cover how to take account student loan? Okay, I've done that. Do I have to pay zakat on student maintenance? Okay, I've done that as well. Do you pay zakat on all pensions? Pensions we've covered. Rental property we've covered. Oh, do I pay zakat on rental property value and income, but since April not rented? No, again, what cash do you have right now? How do I calculate gold in Bari? Is that Urdu for grams? Yeah, so again, whatever the weight is. So you translate these weights, okay, these kind of ethnic references to weights, translate them into grams, and then you're done. How to calculate zakat on ETFs is money invested on a long-term basis. So it depends what the underlying is. Just judge it based on the underlying. So if the underlying is equities, 25%, right? If the underlying is a mix of things, then you can take the pension kind of mixed portfolio type of assessment. If you know the mix, you can get in touch specifically and we can help, inshallah, with a specific question. Should the zakah recipient be decided or considered based on the gold or silver nisab? If we're paying on the basis of silver, we should consider on the basis of silver. How much zakah can I give to one person? Can it exceed the silver or gold amount? Yes, it can exceed the silver or gold amount. Sure, it can. I mean, classically, by the way, it's really funny, right? Classically, the conversations around how much zakat to give somebody were people were saying we should give them enough to fulfill them for a year. Take care of them properly. And that was how it was talked about, at the time. So, the idea is to try and really help someone. I mean, how much is going to really move someone over the line? Oftentimes when we think about zakah and we give it, it's just like, let's just do the absolute minimum basic. How can we really support someone? Okay, is the idea. Okay. Bills and utility mortgage I've covered, so I'm not going to do that again. My daughter has been gifted gold since she's 1 year old. I haven't bought her gold myself. Do I pay zakat on this? All right, so someone has answered the question, but obviously it depends on the view that you take, right? So if that gold is like a store of, again, the non-Hanafi view is, yes, you would pay zakat. The Hanafi view is, then she wouldn't, right? Partly it also depends on how you see it. So as a parent, like some people might, if a parent sees their child's wealth as kind of wealth for them to dip into, let's say, right? Because they are the kind of guardian or the responsible party, then definitely it becomes subject to zakat. But if you see it as, okay, she's got this gold, she's a minor, and it's her gold, then the Hanafi view is you don't pay. But everybody else says you do. So I mean, I have 3 daughters, alhamdulillah, and I include their gold. They're all, they're young. They're all 1, 6, and 8. I personally include it. Okay. Oops. I have a friend who just took Shahada. Will she have to pay zakah this year or she waits? Muslimah for 1 year. Yeah, 1 year. 1 year. Yeah, so if you take your Shahada on the day, on whatever day, and then on that day you're already above the nisab, then in 1 year's time, that's it. So that's nice to remember. The day you became Muslim is the day you pay your zakah. I like that. All right, if I didn't pay zakah last year, do I calculate last year's and this year's and give it all together? Yes. ASAP. If you're paying back your student loan, you deduct that amount from the zakah that you're paying. Again, treat it similar to the mortgage scenario. You don't make deductions for future debt payments, because when I make my future debt payments next year, my cash will be lower than it would otherwise have been. So I'm already adjusting for that. I've been told that zakat does not need to be given on a platinum ring. Can you confirm if this is correct? The ring is 2-carat diamond. That's correct. You don't need to pay zakat on a platinum ring. And that is why those who say that when you wear a gold ring or you have a gold necklace, that you don't pay, because it's equivalent in that sense. Property not giving income, we've covered. Should an owner of agricultural land or other empty land eligible to No, I see. Should an owner of agricultural land or other empty land be eligible to receive a zakat if they're in financial crisis? Well, they certainly would not be a priority, because technically they should be able to sell the land. But if they cannot sell the land, right, for whatever reason, so they're in a stuck situation, they need support in the meantime, then potentially, yes. It depends on the scenario. Charities distribute zakat money to Muslim countries, but there may be some non-Muslim poor people also receive zakat as well. What do you think about it, given that zakat should not be given to a non-Muslim? What do I think? I think that charities can make an assessment of that, and charities they will have a rough idea. And so charities can actually apportion appropriately in terms of if they're funding projects or whatever in different places where they're using zakat, where there are a mix of Muslims and others, then they can, in their own accounting, they should be able to adjust or cover the cost of project proportionately, proportionately to the for those for depending on the cost of the project, right? So I think charities need to make an adjustment for that. You'll have to check with whichever charity. Of course, if you give it through NZF, you don't need to worry about it because we do all that. If we pay extra in any given year, will that additional amount maybe sadaqah, right? If you so zakat can carry forward. So if you know that, okay, my actual calculation is £1,500 of zakah, but I want to pay 2,000, and you're intending at 2,000 of zakah, 500 can actually carry forward to your next calculation. If you're paying extra, just topping it up because I just want to make sure and it's about this year's zakah, then that's that, right? So yeah. Okay, my second property is lived by my mum in another country. Is there any zakah? No. If someone recently remarried, but her husband lives in another country and has a property of his own while she lives on her own, would one of the property be subject to zakah? No. If a husband is poor and the wife has inherited assets, could she pay her zakah to help her husband's owing? Yeah, anyone can pay zakah on behalf of someone else. So, technically, you could pay my zakah, right? I won't ask you to do that, but you could pay zakah on my behalf, and I can pay it on your behalf. So husband and wife, right, is no real, there's no difference really, is what I'm saying. It's just like paying zakah on behalf of anybody. How do you weigh the gold? But ideally, we should pay our own zakah. And women who are used to their zakah being paid by their husband or their father or whoever, I mean, pay it yourself is better. How do you weigh the gold? How do you weigh the gold if it has lots of stones? Okay, we've done that. Jeweler needs to make the adjustment. I have gold of the value of the nisab. Does the money in my account have to be held for 1 year? Okay, we've covered that as well. That's fine. At what age does zakah become mandatory? Age of puberty. Cryptocurrency we've done. Am I liable for zakah on my offset mortgage account? I have money in that account that offsets my mortgage. Do I pay zakah on that? Yeah, good question. Yes, to my knowledge and understanding, yes. But send us a query on that separately and I'll confirm for you for sure. Is zakah due on the value of the house we live in and any investment properties? Okay, we've done all this. Lost my jewelry. Oh no. How long do I pay zakah for it? No, if you've lost it, you don't pay zakah on it. I mean, if it's to that extent, you've lost it for more than a year, it looks like. We all have bank accounts and all of them have come with some interest payment that we have no control over. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, I have bank accounts in different accounts and I've managed to tell them, don't give me interest. But how can you dispose of that interest? You can pay it on the NZF page. There is a riba box. And we will take your riba. Do I need to calculate my zakah recalculate if the amount of my savings and cash in hand bank has reduced through spending before the zakah is paid? Recalculate zakah if the amount of... No. You do not recalculate because you need to calculate on your anniversary. If you calculate properly on your anniversary, then that's your calculation and that's your figure. Now, afterwards, obviously, you should then pay it ASAP. If you delay the payment for whatever reason, then you should do it. Then you should, you still need to owe the figure that you owe. Okay. Mahbub, if you're there, we've got this. Maybe you can just paste in the chat how people can book consultations, one-to-one consultations, or submit questions. Please,
I'll just put that in for everyone.
Just let people know. So yeah, because there's a ton of questions here. I don't know how many. I mean, I'm happy to go for a bit more, to be honest, but I appreciate there's a lot here.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
I'm happy to go for another, say, 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Sure. For those that that have not had their question answered, I'm just going to post a link This is where you can book a free one-to-one consultation with an in-house Mufti that we have, who can go through your specific circumstance and have your questions answered. So I've just posted the link there.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So that's done. If you have no gold, what is the nisab amount? Stick with silver. How much zakah should we pay on a Sharia compliant child trust fund? Is 100% zakatable or 25% zakatable as it is invested? Yeah, just use that same proportion of the, oops, there's pension portions, where are they? Yeah. So yeah, 26%. Go with that. Okay. How do we calculate the cash balance we've had for a year? Yeah, exactly. Well, this is the point. You just take your current balance and then you're sorted. How do I make sure the recipient of zakah, who's my relative, doesn't have the nisab amount? Yeah. So this is difficult. And this is one of the issues of paying to, in terms of with family relatives and stuff, it's quite hard to kind of sometimes make this assessment. It is permissible to kind of just make a, if you know that someone is struggling, okay, with their basic requirements, their basic needs, then you don't have to necessarily ask all the questions to get down to the nitty-gritty detail. Okay. So yeah, but make an assessment, but try and err on the side of caution. If you're really not sure, but you want to help, but you're really not sure what someone's situation, then better, if you want to help them, better to help them with sadaqah funds, perhaps. Buy to let we've done. Okay. If you loan 1K for 3 years and include it within your zakah calculation, do you pay 2.5% for 3 years, or 2.5% of 1K the first year, then 2.5% 975 the second year? Oh, I see. Well, it's such a minor difference, right? I mean, 2.5% of £25 is like, you're talking pence. So in that scenario, I'd just say, just do it on the whole thing. But yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, the thing is, you're owed 1,000, right? And you're still paying from other cash. I mean, I think it's safer. I think there's an argument to do what you're saying, right? But I think it's safer just to take the full amount. And it really is not going to make much difference to your zakah at all. Even at the level of £10,000 or £100,000, it will barely make a difference. Can you give zakah to members of your family, maybe extended family? Yes. You cannot give zakah to your parents or your children or any member of your family that you ordinarily care for. All right. But otherwise, yes. Does the end of the calculator use scrap value for gold? That is a good question. And I have not looked at the details of the calculator for a little while, because alhamdulillah, the team is looking at that stuff. But it's a good question. We need to check that. I need to check that. And I think one thing, a discussion that has happened, is to try and, we're going to, inshallah, improve the calculator to put in the various carat amounts, which then adjust for the scrap value. So if it's not the case right now, then it should be doing that. And inshallah, we will do that. In which case, for now, maybe enter the pound amount rather than the weight. You said zakatable wealth doesn't need to be for a whole year. We just need to consider how much we have on the zakah anniversary date. Is it the Islamic rule or just your recommendation? None of what I've said is just my personal view. For example, if someone has £20,000 at the beginning of the year, then whole year, most of the time, he has just around £1,000. Zakah anniversary date, he has £25,000. Should he pay on £25,000 instead of £1,000? Yes, exactly. I mean, that's the point. The point is, what do I have now? Because the whole point of the zakah is, what do I have at my disposal now, right? In terms of what can I do stuff with? I mean, just imagine, like back in the day, think about how it would have worked back in the day. Those conversations weren't taking place in terms of like when zakah collectors went around to collect people's zakah. It's based on what you have with you right now. If you've got 40 sheep, I'm going to take 1 sheep. I'm not going to ask you whether you had 12 sheep like 9 months ago and then 18 sheep after that, and whatever, all these ups and downs. It basically becomes impossible. And if you think about it, it doesn't seem to make sense. If we do this thing of how much have I had for a year, what that means is that the very lowest point of wealth throughout the whole year, so even if that was 8 months ago, right, I dipped down to 1,000. But now today I've got 100,000. So now I've got £100,000 today, but I'm going to pay on 2.5% of £1,000, £25, because I was down at 1,000 8 months ago. I mean, that's ancient history. That doesn't matter. What matters is what you have today. So, there's a lot of logic behind this view. And it isn't, I think this view is this issue is a largely misunderstanding. Okay. Because actually it's not that you have had the issue is, have you had wealth for a year means I was above the nisab last year, I have wealth today, right? Like I have had wealth for a year. Not every fluctuation. I mean, otherwise you're adjusting for the timing of every salary payment and this and that. By the way, one thing is really interesting, right? People always ask this question. Every time people ask me this question in relation to it, just because just now before the Zakat anniversary, a big amount of money came in. That's why they ask the question.
Never the other way.
Yeah, never the other way. So if for the whole year I had £100,000, and then the day before I have to calculate my Zakah, I drop down to 5,000. In my 10 years, no one has called me and said, oh, so should I pay on 100,000? Because, for 354 days, right, the lunar calendar, right, 354 days, I had 100,000. On the 355th day, I went down to 5,000. And no one's going to ask then, is it, should I be paying 2.5% of 100,000 or 5,000? So look, there's a lot of sense and fairness and frankly ease, okay, in paying as it today. And this is something which as scholars have, talked about for a long time. So it's not my whim and my desire. Right. What if my share plan hasn't matured? So it's money in a pot that I can't access, maybe in 3 years. Yeah. So shares, like this kind of share plan, they are subject to zakah based on how much has vested. If you were to leave the company today, what would you still possess? And then you pay according on that amount. If none of it has vested, meaning if you left the company today, it wouldn't be yours, then technically it's not really yours, right? So then you wouldn't include it. What time is it? Okay, we'll stop at 6:45. Hard stop 6:45. Okay, so for those of you who've stayed, mashallah, most of you have stayed and you're listening. We'll stop in 10 minutes precisely, inshallah. Okay, because frankly, I need a little rest. I've done like 4 presentations today, so I need a rest before Maghrib. Otherwise, my night is going to be not very productive. Okay, so let's have a look. I've recently separated from my husband and we are in the process of reaching a financial settlement, keeping the family house. I will need to pay my husband 150,000. Been advised. Yeah. The thing is that all of these future maybe isn't exactly how it's going to work, and this amount and that amount of the future stuff, right? It's like unless it, and I appreciate it's a, obviously this is a difficult situation and an emotionally kind of burdensome situation, and I ask Allah to kind of grant you ease and strength throughout this whole process. So I totally recognize that, okay? But unless a payment or a debt or any form of payment is now owed or ready to be paid, must be paid now or today, okay, then whatever cash we have with us, we include in our zakah today, unless something is an established liability. So if you treat whatever payment you're talking about in terms of the future as an established liability that cannot be changed, whose amount is known as a matter of fact, yeah, then, because sometimes in these situations, I'm not saying, I don't know, obviously, I don't know your situation. You may not think it's obviously possible. Sometimes in these situations, it is well known that couples who are in the midst of agreeing their financial settlement, right, for divorce, 3 months later, they're back together again. Now, I'm not saying that's your case, and you may see that's never going to happen, but probably most people think it's never going to happen, not when they started that process. So the future is quite uncertain. Now, unless the future is known, okay, with that degree of certainty, then you will not make adjustments for these future things, because lots of different things could happen. Does an organization need to pay zakah? Not a charitable organization, but a business is an organization, and that does need to pay zakah. So it's about private or public wealth. Since a charity or other such things are public institutions, right, on public wealth and for social purposes, then they don't. But private ones do. Student loan. How about shares? Workplace of given? Yeah, done that. Okay, I'm going to flick through these questions and just see what we haven't covered. Pension we have covered. Pension contributions. If some cash is pending to be taken out from the account, do I calculate with the cash after the amount? Yeah, because it's pending is basically gone, right? It's usually cash is usually pending in the account because of some transaction that has been made, right? And it's just in that kind of in that holding state until it goes out. I was under the impression that you only pay zakat on gold above a certain dollar. As in zakat comes in only when you have a certain amount of gold. Okay, that's kind of true if you're talking about gold only in the context of the gold nisab. But once you have gold above the nisab, which is what we discussed, certain amount of weight in grams or a value of gold, then once you have the amount beyond that, then you pay on the whole amount. You don't pay on what's above the nisab. You pay, if you're above the nisab, you pay on the whole amount. Okay, so if the nisab was £3,000 of gold, and you have 3,000 and 4,000 pounds of gold, then you're paying £4,000, not on 1,000. When using the calculator, shares bought since when, blah, blah, blah. Anything you have today, whatever you possess right now. What does NZF do with sadaqah that is donated? Non-zakah funds we use to cover marketing costs, technology investment, governance costs, finance costs, all the other costs of running the show, basically. I'm just flicking through the questions. I invested £5,000 or 5,000 in a scheme which was meant to make a good return a few years ago. The person I invested with has been making excuses why the money has never come back, stuck with the bank. Yeah, I come across these every year. I've lost hope of ever getting my money back. Do I give zakah on it or not? Based on this, it might depend on the detail of the scheme or whatever, but it sounds like no. It sounds like not the case. Okay, let me go from the top again. I don't have, Sister Shazia, how do you calculate the price of white gold? 18 karat with a 0.5 carat down. We did cover this, and we said where it's mixed metal, which is basically what white gold is, then you just pay on the proportion, yeah, of the gold proportion. So so the diamond is irrelevant, and the white gold will be some proportion of gold of that. So what is a proportion of gold in your white gold? If it's 50%, then you pay 50%. That's basically it. I've inherited residential plots of land in Pakistan. These have considerable value. They don't generate income. They were purchased by my parents from a few years to decades ago. Eventually, I'll sell them, bring the money to the UK. How should these plots for residential land be treated for zakat purposes? Excluded. Irrelevant to your zakah. Now, in terms of NHS pension, civil service pension, all of these things, like what kind of pension is it and what do I do? So this is where you need to work out or like just double check, because from what I heard recently from people who either working in the NHS or working in a civil service, like you even have the choice sometimes, the option of different types of schemes. Yeah. So I think it's best for you to double check yourself directly, you know, what kind of pension you have with the employer, or with your HR department, etc. How does paying zakat work for family in debt? If a person is only a little bit in debt, is that okay to pay your zakat to them? Or is there a set quantity to determine whether they're eligible? So technically speaking, it's the whole, right? What do I have minus what I owe? Same calculation for the recipient. And if what they have minus what they owe brings them below the nisab, then technically they can be supported, right? If they have that debt. So even if it's a small amount of debt, but you want to clear it for them, then that can be done. But it should only really be done if like they themselves definitely can't afford to pay it, obviously, you know, if they can pay the debt, they should pay the debt. Yeah. Some people talk about, okay, what if I've got, this is a separate scenario now, question about, okay, if I'm saving money for something, do I include that in my zakah? And the answer is yes. Okay. You're saving money to buy a house, you're saving money to buy a car, you're saving money for your future, to pay for your children's education, whatever. You include it all in your zakah. You're saving money even to go on Hajj, you include it in your zakah. All right. So if you can do it for money that you're saving for Hajj, obviously you can do it for money you're saving for anything else. All right. What if we want to divide our zakah between NZF and our own? well, what if you do? It's a free country. You're absolutely allowed to do that. So that's something which, is fine. I would just say, as I said, the most important thing is just don't completely ignore your locality. That's all. Okay. You know what? I think I'm going to leave it there. Alhamdulillah. Obviously, there's lots of questions. We've answered about 50 questions, so I think it's quite a lot. Mahbub has shared with you the one-to-one consultation, a link. Mahbub, if people want to email instead, is that something an option as well? And can you put that in? For
yes, they can. They can also email as well. I'm going to put the email address.
If you put the email in, and also just maybe a link to the the FAQs or the Q&A bank on the website, please. Yeah?
Sure. There's a page which has all the services that we have. So whatever is most appropriate for you, you can we can help you through any one of these means. So I'll post this on now.
Fine. All right. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up? Shall I wrap up now?
No, I don't have anything to say other than to thank everyone and to make the most of these last days of Ramadan, and anything else that you want to say, Iqbal, in addition to that.
All right, brilliant. Okay, no, Jazakumullah khair. So thanks, Mahbub, for hosting, and thank you to all of you for joining today. I hope it's been beneficial. It's always the case with the Zakah session, especially, that there'll be lots and lots of more and more questions. We could go for hours, I'm sure. So I hope that it has been beneficial for you. And any outstanding questions, we're here to help. We're here to serve. So please do get them through, and we'll do our very best to support you as much as we can. But just remember, when you're giving your Zakah, what really matters and what's important, yes, get the amount right, but give it with a sound intention. Give it with the intention to further the deen of Allah and out of service and commitment to Him. And yes, as Mahbub said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts and accept our efforts in the last days and nights of Ramadan. May Allah accept from you all and answer all of your du'as, your supplications. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah reward you. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Take care, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.